Sir, you can't just walk in here and expect to withdraw that kind of money. This isn't a lottery payout. The words sliced through the quiet hum of the bank lobby, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Jessica Keller, the branch manager of the prestigious Hamilton Trust Bank in downtown Atlanta, stood behind the counter with a smug expression, arms crossed, tapping her manicured nails against the marble surface. Across from her stood a tall black man in his early 50s. His clothes were simple, dark slacks and a navy sweater, but his posture radiated quiet authority. In his left hand, he held a withdrawal slip requesting $250 dollars, a substantial but not unusual amount for private banking clients. Yet, from the moment he had approached the counter, Jessica had greeted him not with professional courtesy, but with suspicion wrapped in thinly veiled disdain. "I already explained, ma'am," the man said calmly, his voice low but steady. "The funds are for a property closing today. I made arrangements with the bank manager 2 days ago. I was told everything was approved." Jessica snorted softly, loud enough for those in the growing crowd behind him to hear. "That's funny because I am the manager, and no such arrangement exists. Honestly, people come in here with all kinds of stories, fraudsters especially." Whispers rippled among the waiting customers. An elderly white man leaned toward his wife and muttered, "Probably trying to scam the bank." A young teller behind Jessica covered her mouth, barely suppressing a grin. Another staff member, a security guard stationed near the door, began walking toward the scene, sensing what he assumed would soon become a disturbance. "Sir," Jessica continued, raising her voice slightly for the benefit of the onlookers, "this institution has protocols. Large cash withdrawals are flagged for fraud review. We can't hand over that much to just anyone who claims they have a balance." The man didn't flinch. He reached into a leather folio and produced documentation, a notarized property agreement, proof of the arranged withdrawal, and identification matching his account. He placed them neatly on the counter. "Perhaps you should review these before making assumptions." Jessica glanced at the papers without touching them. "I'm not going to waste time verifying what's clearly fabricated. The bank's decision stands. Denied." Behind him, someone chuckled. "He thought dressing nice would fool them." Another voice chimed in. "Try a payday loan store next time." The man gathered his documents with care. He could feel the heat of dozens of eyes boring into his back, some indifferent, some hostile. Yet his face remained composed, his dignity intact even as the branch manager and her staff sought to strip it away. "Very well," he said softly. "I appreciate you making your position crystal clear." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Don't get any ideas about causing a scene. If you don't leave, I'll have security remove you." The security guard, a heavy-set man named Craig, arrived and folded his arms. "Sir, you'll need to exit the premises now. We don't tolerate disruptions." "Disruption?" the man repeated, as if tasting the word. "I came here to conduct lawful business. You've chosen to escalate this." Jessica leaned over the counter, lowering her voice but ensuring those nearby could still hear. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but Hamilton Trust has a certain clientele. You're clearly in the wrong place. Take your fraudulent documents and leave before this gets worse." At that moment, a young teller named Elliot hesitated at his station. He had reviewed the man's account just the day before. The balance was real. The withdrawal had indeed been pre-approved by upper management. But Jessica had overridden the transaction early that morning, citing suspicious activity. Elliot's conscience wrestled with fear. Speaking up could cost him his job. Staying silent would mean betraying a man who had done nothing wrong. As Craig lightly grasped the man's arm to guide him toward the door, Elliot made a decision that would alter the course of the day, and perhaps his entire career. He quickly printed a duplicate of the withdrawal approval notice and slipped it into an envelope. Quietly, as the man passed his teller window, Elliot pressed the envelope into his hand. "Sir," he whispered urgently, "you might need this." The man paused only briefly, nodded once in gratitude, and continued toward the exit. Behind him, Jessica smirked in victory. Confident she had protected the bank from what she perceived as a would-be criminal, customers resumed their banking, some still whispering and shaking their heads. Jessica returned to her office. Feeling satisfied she had upheld the bank's integrity, she had no idea she had just made the most catastrophic mistake of her professional life. The man, now standing outside beneath the grand stone arch of the bank's entrance, looked down at the envelope in his hand. Inside was the confirmation he needed, not just for the transaction, but for what was about to come next. "That will do," he murmured, pulling out his phone. "That will do perfectly." As the tall man stepped toward the bank's polished glass doors, the cold grip of humiliation wrapped tighter around him. The quiet murmur of customers behind him had shifted, no longer whispers of mere suspicion. Now it was outright dismissal, layered with the casual cruelty that only a public scene could invite. He had come to conduct legitimate business. Instead, he had been reduced to an unwelcome spectacle. Security guard Craig maintained a firm but measured hold on the man's elbow. "Let's make this easy. Sir, no need for any more trouble. I'm just doing my job." His tone was not unkind, but it carried the weight of authority, reinforced by the silent approval of the bank staff watching from behind the counters. Jessica Keller remained near her office door, arms crossed, lips curled into a faint smirk. She whispered something to a younger colleague, who responded with a stifled laugh. To them, the situation was resolved. Another fraudster escorted out, order restored. The man offered no resistance. He nodded to Craig. "Of course. There's no trouble here." As they approached the exit, sunlight streamed through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Just as Craig reached to push open the heavy door, a soft voice called out, "Sir, excuse me, sir." It was Elliot, the young teller from before. His face was pale, but his resolve was steady. He held a plain envelope in both hands, gripping it tightly as though it contained something far more valuable than mere paper. Jessica noticed the movement, her brow furrowed. "Elliot, what are you doing?" she demanded sharply. Elliot ignored her, stepping forward. He reached the man just as Craig paused. Surprised by the interruption, Elliot slipped the envelope into the man's free hand and whispered quickly, "You'll want to keep this. It's the approval notice for your withdrawal. I printed it before the override. The system still logged the authorization. Don't let them tell you otherwise." For the first time since the confrontation began, the man's expression softened. He looked directly into Elliot's eyes and gave a single nod. "Thank you. That was the right thing to do." Jessica's voice rose, sharp with panic now. "Elliot, step back. That's unauthorized disclosure of internal documents. You're risking termination." But it was too late. The envelope had changed hands. The man tucked it carefully into his folio alongside the other documents Jessica had so arrogantly dismissed. Craig glanced between Jessica and Elliot, clearly uncertain now. His grip on the man's arm loosened. "Ma'am, do you still want him removed? He's leaving peacefully." Jessica hesitated. For a fleeting moment, the control she wielded so confidently had slipped. She hadn't anticipated defiance from her staff, nor had she expected this quiet customer, who had shown no anger or threat, to be armed now with proof of her overreach. "Yes, remove him," she snapped. "And Elliot, we'll discuss your actions immediately after." The man walked out into the bright afternoon. Craig followed at a respectful distance, but no longer touched him. The doors closed behind them with a muted thud, sealing the divide between the bank's marble sanctuary and the bustling city street. Outside, the man paused. He inhaled deeply, the spring air crisp with the scent of blooming dogwoods lining the avenue. In his hand, the envelope felt heavier than its physical weight. It was not merely a piece of paper. It was leverage. It was accountability. That young man has integrity, he thought. I'll remember that. He pulled out his phone. His contact list wasn't long, but the names it held carried power: executive board members, legal counsel, and most importantly, his own advisory team at Marshall Equity Holdings. This won't take long, he murmured. Dialing. Prepare an emergency shareholder review for Hamilton Trust. I want the full board notified within the hour. As he spoke, his voice remained steady, but his eyes betrayed the fire now burning beneath his calm demeanor. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about principle, about the systemic disrespect he had just endured in front of a crowd that believed wealth, competence, and respect had a skin color. And now, thanks to a brave teller named Elliot, he had the document that would unravel Jessica Keller's illusion of untouchable authority. 10 minutes ago, they thought they were in control. He thought as he ended the call. In 10 minutes more, they'll learn otherwise. The man, whose name had not been asked nor offered, walked down the steps of the Hamilton Trust Bank building, every footfall echoing against the stone facade as if the building itself were warning that the balance of power was about to shift. What Jessica Keller and her staff had mistaken for a quiet retreat was, in truth, a calculated withdrawal, not of money, but of patience. Evan Marshall paused at the curb where his black Lincoln Navigator waited, the chauffeur having monitored the scene from a discreet distance. When Evan opened the rear door and sat down, the driver did not speak. He knew better than to interrupt Mr. R. Marshall during moments like this, moments when humiliation had been served not as a mistake, but as a message, and messages always required an answer. We proceed, Evan said calmly. Connect me to Chambers, then notify counsel. The entire board must be alerted. The call to Richard Chambers, chairman of Marshall Equity Holdings, was brief but consequential. Richard listened without interruption, his measured breathing the only sound as Evan recounted what had transpired inside the bank lobby. When Evan finished, there was a pause. Then Richard's response came clear and firm. Understood. You have full discretion. I'll inform the shareholders that the special session will convene within 2 hours. We'll need a full audit of the branch and its leadership team. Legal will draft the necessary filings. Good. And Richard, notify media relations. There may be public interest in the outcome. Consider it done. As the Navigator pulled away from the curb, Evan opened the envelope young Elliot had slipped into his hand. The document within was not just a transaction approval. It contained internal comments from the bank's management review system. Jessica Keller had overridden the pre-approved withdrawal, citing client appearance inconsistent with requested funds and possible fraudulent activity based on non-standard behavior. Those phrases were damning, not just because they revealed bias, but because they provided written evidence of discriminatory banking practices that violated not only the institution's own policies, but also federal regulations governing equal access and anti-discrimination in financial services. She didn't just make a poor judgment, Evan thought. She created a liability. 2 hours later, Evan entered the boardroom of Hamilton Trust's downtown headquarters, a sleek space designed for the comfort of the powerful, floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Atlanta's skyline. The long mahogany table seated 12, though today nearly 20 executives and legal advisors had crowded into the room, each face reflecting varying degrees of concern, confusion, and curiosity. Jessica Keller was not among them. She was still managing the branch where her career was about to end. The bank's CEO, Lawrence Dixon, stood as Evan approached. Mr. Marshall, I'm told there's an urgent matter. We weren't expecting a shareholder session today. That's the nature of emergencies, Evan replied smoothly, placing the envelope on the table. I'll be brief. This morning, I visited the Hamilton Trust branch at Peachtree Plaza to execute a pre-approved withdrawal necessary for a property acquisition. Despite prior authorization and clear documentation, I was publicly accused of fraud, denied service, and forcibly removed from the premises. A ripple moved through the room. Some board members exchanged glances. Others leaned forward. The decision to override the transaction, Evan continued, was justified internally by Manager Keller, citing my appearance and non-standard behavior. In plain terms, I was deemed too black and too modestly dressed to possibly possess the wealth required for such a transaction. Silence fell heavy over the room. No one dared speak. Though some shifted uncomfortably, Evan allowed the pause to linger, understanding that silence often underscored the weight of spoken words. I have here the documentation showing the original approval and the override notations, he said, sliding the envelope toward Dixon. Additionally, security footage and multiple witnesses can attest to the public humiliation inflicted by your staff. I've instructed legal counsel to prepare a compliance complaint for regulatory authorities and a preliminary civil rights violation filing. Dixon's face had drained of color. Mr. Marshall, This is a serious allegation. I assure you this is not reflective of Hamilton Trust's values. Your values, Evan replied coldly, are irrelevant. Your actions or inactions are what matter. As of this moment, I'm calling for the immediate suspension of Manager Jessica Keller pending a full investigation. Furthermore, I am invoking my shareholder rights to review the employment practices and discrimination training protocols of all retail branches under your leadership. One board member, an older man with silver hair and a crimson tie, leaned in. Evan, surely this can be resolved internally. No need to escalate to federal oversight or media involvement. I disagree, Evan said. It's not merely about my experience. It's about the broader pattern of which this incident is undoubtedly a symptom. I believe Hamilton Trust has failed to address systemic issues that place minority clients at a disadvantage, both in perception and service. Another board member, a woman known for her sharp legal mind, interjected. If what you're alleging is substantiated, and I see no reason to doubt your account, the bank faces not only regulatory penalties, but potential class action litigation. Our fiduciary duty requires immediate corrective action. Dixon nodded stiffly, his authority crumbling beneath the reality that this was no longer a personnel issue, but a governance crisis. Agreed. Manager Keller will be suspended effective immediately. Compliance will audit her branch, and Human Resources will begin a full review. What further steps do you recommend? Mr. Marshall. Evan's eyes swept the room. Beyond internal audits and disciplinary actions, Hamilton Trust must establish a comprehensive inclusion training program developed by external experts, not by your current HR team. Additionally, I propose the creation of an independent client advocacy board to oversee equitable treatment practices. These measures will not erase what occurred, but they may prevent recurrence. Before Dixon could respond, Evan raised a hand. And one more thing. The young teller who chose integrity over complicity, Elliot, must not face any punitive action. In fact, I recommend he be promoted or at least recognized for his ethical courage. A murmur of agreement moved through the board members. In the business world, integrity was a rare and valuable commodity. Elliot's action had not only upheld a moral standard, but had likely saved the bank from deeper scandal. At that moment, Evan's phone vibrated. A message from his legal counsel. Media outlets have been briefed. Story embargoed pending your go-ahead. He looked up at the board. I trust I have your cooperation. Dixon exhaled slowly, shoulders slumping in defeat. You have it. Then we proceed. 2 hours later, back at the Peachtree Plaza branch, Jessica Keller was called into her office. She expected praise for her firm handling of what she still believed had been a fraud attempt. Instead, she was met by HR representatives and 2 compliance officers. "Ms. Keller, effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation into discriminatory practices and policy violations," the HR director announced. "This is a mistake." Jessica protested. "I protected the bank. That man was lying. He couldn't possibly—" "That man," the compliance officer interrupted, "is Evan Marshall, not only a legitimate client but also a principal shareholder, and the board has authorized full cooperation with the regulatory review his legal team has initiated." Jessica's face paled as her confident veneer shattered. The colleagues who had laughed with her earlier now avoided eye contact. Even Craig, the security guard, stepped back as if fearing contagion from the fallout. As Jessica gathered her belongings under the watchful gaze of compliance officers, the weight of her actions finally settled upon her. What she had dismissed as a routine exercise of gatekeeping had become a career-ending blunder, not because she had been caught violating policy, but because she had misjudged a man's worth based on appearance and, more damningly, on race. Outside the office, Elliot watched silently. He felt no triumph in her downfall, only relief that integrity had, for once, been rewarded. Evan Marshall stood nearby, having arrived quietly once the board's directives were set in motion. He caught Elliot's eye and gave a respectful nod. "Good men must stand when others falter," Evan said softly. "You stood." The next morning arrived with an unusual quiet across the Peachtree Plaza branch of Hamilton Trust Bank. Employees who typically exchanged lighthearted chatter and casual greetings now moved with subdued urgency. Rumors had spread rapidly since the previous afternoon, whispering through every department like an electrical current. No one could confirm the details, but everyone understood that something monumental had occurred, and that whatever it was, it had placed Jessica Keller, their confident, often intimidating branch manager, at the center of a growing storm. At precisely 9 a.m., the main lobby doors opened, not for customers but for an entourage that included the bank's compliance director, human resources executives, 2 members of the legal team, and Evan Marshall himself. He wore a sharp-tailored navy suit now, the modest clothes from the day before replaced by the uniform of corporate power. Still, his composure remained the same, calm, steady, and unyielding. Jessica, already seated in her office, stood quickly when the delegation entered. For a moment, her instincts as a manager took over. She smoothed her blazer and prepared to assert control. "Mr. Dixon must have sent you," she began, assuming this was some formality, perhaps even a belated commendation for her vigilance. "If this is about yesterday, I can assure you I followed protocol. The man was suspicious. My team and I protected the bank's assets." The HR director, a woman named Karen Solis, held up a hand, cutting Jessica off. "Miss Keller, this is not a commendation meeting. Please sit down." Jessica's eyes narrowed. She hesitated but obeyed. Evan stepped forward, setting a thin folder on her desk. "This contains a full transcript of yesterday's incident, including internal system logs showing the override you executed without proper cause. It also includes security footage and testimonies from staff and clients." His tone was not angry. It was, perhaps more unnervingly, entirely neutral. "Based on this evidence, and as authorized by the board of directors, you are hereby terminated from your position effective immediately." Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. "Your actions constituted not only a breach of protocol," Karen continued, "but a violation of both company anti-discrimination policies and federal banking regulations. The compliance department has reported the matter to the appropriate authorities. You will be contacted separately regarding any pending investigations. This is absurd, Jessica finally managed, her voice cracking. I followed my training. That man's behavior was inconsistent with legitimate clientele. His appearance, Evan interrupted softly, was the sole basis for your judgment. You never reviewed his documents. You ignored an approved transaction, and you embarrassed not just a customer, but an equity partner of this bank. Behind him, staff gathered discreetly near office doorways and along the hallway. Elliot stood among them, his face tense but resolute. I demand a chance to appeal this, Jessica snapped, regaining a sliver of her former defiance. You can't just dismiss me based on one incident. On the contrary, the compliance director replied, we can, and we are. This is not solely about yesterday. Your employment records show multiple complaints over the past 2 years regarding bias and unprofessional conduct. Until now, those complaints resulted in warnings or were dismissed due to lack of conclusive evidence. Yesterday's events have provided conclusive evidence. Jessica's gaze darted toward her assistant manager and then toward Craig, the security guard who had escorted Evan out. Neither would meet her eyes. She realized, with a sinking sensation, that no one was going to stand up for her. The authority she had once wielded had evaporated in the span of a single day. You have 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings, Karen stated. Security will escort you out of the building. Your access to all internal systems has already been revoked. Jessica stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. This is a mistake. You're going to regret this. Evan looked at her, not with anger, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had already calculated every outcome. No, Ms. Keller, the only regret here is that you mistook prejudice for professionalism, and that mistake has consequences. As Jessica gathered her things in silence, Karen gestured toward Craig and another security officer. They followed Jessica to her office but maintained a respectful distance. This was not a spectacle to be exploited, but a process to be completed with dignity, even for someone who had shown none. Outside the main office, customers had begun arriving for the day. News of the incident had leaked into the community, and some paused at the windows, peering in with curiosity. Among them were clients who had been present during the prior day's humiliation. Word had traveled fast, as it often did in tight-knit professional circles. Once Jessica was escorted out, Evan turned toward the gathered employees. I understand many of you witnessed what occurred yesterday or have since heard accounts of it, he began, his voice steady and carrying across the lobby. Let me assure you that no staff member who acted with integrity will face repercussions. In fact, I wish to publicly commend Mr. Elliot Turner. Elliot stiffened as all eyes shifted toward him. Mr. Turner chose the harder path, Evan continued. He could have remained silent. Instead, he ensured that the truth surfaced. Even at personal risk, such integrity is rare, and it deserves recognition. Karen stepped forward, holding an official letter. By directive of the board and upon recommendation, Mr. Mike Turner is hereby promoted to Assistant Branch Manager for Client Relations. A ripple of applause moved through the staff. Some clapped out of genuine approval, others out of relief that the tides had clearly shifted toward accountability and fairness. Evan nodded to Elliot. Your actions preserved not only a client's rights but the reputation of this institution. I hope your colleagues will follow your example. As the applause subsided, Evan addressed the group once more. This branch and this bank will be undergoing comprehensive training on equitable service practices. Outside consultants will lead this initiative. No longer will personal bias be tolerated as a substitute for professional judgment. He allowed his gaze to sweep across the room, ensuring his message was received clearly. For those willing to grow and uphold the standards expected of Hamilton Trust, there is a place for you here. For those who cannot, I recommend you seek employment elsewhere. No one spoke, The message had landed with undeniable clarity. By noon, news outlets had picked up the story. While Evan had initially hoped to resolve the matter quietly, public interest had made discretion impossible. Headlines ran across local broadcasts and financial news feeds. Branch manager terminated after racial bias scandal at Hamilton Trust. Bank shareholder publicly humiliated. Responds with swift action. Integrity over complicity. A young teller's stand sparks corporate reform. Some pundits speculated on the financial impact, while others praised the rapid response. Civil rights organizations expressed cautious optimism, noting that while the outcome was positive, it highlighted ongoing systemic issues within the banking sector. Internally, Evan convened a meeting with the bank's senior leadership to lay out the next steps. Beyond compliance audits and training, he proposed the creation of a new advisory board composed of community leaders, client representatives, and diversity experts. Their mission, to ensure no client would ever again be judged by their appearance rather than the content of their character or the legitimacy of their financial standing. The board approved the measure unanimously that evening. As the branch closed and employees filtered out into the cooling dusk, Evan lingered near the entrance. Elliot approached quietly. "Mr. Marshall," he began, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Evan shook his head. "No, Elliot, I should be thanking you when others stayed silent. You acted. Without that courage, we might not be standing here today." Elliot smiled slightly. "I guess doing the right thing isn't always easy." "No," Evan agreed, "but it's always necessary." And as the final lock clicked shut on the Peachtree Plaza branch's doors that night, a chapter had closed, not just for Jessica Keller, but for an entire institution that had learned, sometimes painfully, that respect and equity were not just lofty ideals, they were non-negotiable standards. In the weeks following Jessica Keller's termination and the public revelation of the Peachtree Plaza incident, Hamilton Trust Bank faced a reckoning. Media coverage had been relentless at first, but as the story evolved from scandal to reform, public perception shifted. What could have been a long-lasting reputational disaster instead became an opportunity for meaningful change. Led decisively by Evan Marshall, the bank's board, under Evan's guidance, approved a sweeping series of reforms. Mandatory diversity and equity training became not just a corporate checkbox, but a core requirement. More importantly, the bank established the Client Fairness and Advocacy Board, comprised of community leaders, civil rights experts, and representatives from minority-owned businesses. Its purpose was simple yet profound: to ensure that all clients, regardless of appearance, income, or background, received the respect and service they deserved. But Evan wasn't finished. The events at Peachtree Plaza had illuminated deeper flaws within the traditional banking system, flaws that no amount of training or policy tweaking could fully correct. Too many people still felt alienated by the very institutions meant to serve them. Too many had faced the same indignities he had suffered, though most lacked the means to fight back. "Policy changes are good," he told the board during one of their closed-door sessions. "But if we truly want to rebuild trust, we need to rethink the foundation of how we serve the community." And so, Evan announced the creation of Marshall Community Financial, a subsidiary bank built on principles of equity, transparency, and accessibility. The first branch would open just 6 blocks from Peachtree Plaza, in a neighborhood long underserved by traditional banks. "We'll hire staff who reflect the community," Evan explained to the advisory board. "Training will go beyond compliance. It will focus on empathy, understanding, and financial empowerment." The news was met with both excitement and skepticism. Some industry analysts doubted whether such a model could thrive in a competitive market dominated by established institutions. But Evan had anticipated those doubts. He wasn't simply building a new bank. He was creating a movement. He invited Elliot Turner, now assistant branch manager at Peachtree Plaza, to join the leadership team at Marshall Community Financial. "Elliot, your actions sparked this change," Evan said. "I want you to help lead it." Elliot hesitated only a moment before accepting. "If this helps prevent others from going through what you did, or worse, what might have happened if no one had spoken up, then I'm in." Construction on the new branch began swiftly. Evan insisted on transparency throughout the process. Community members were invited to offer feedback on the branch's design, accessibility features, and even the selection of local artists to contribute to the decor. It wasn't just a financial institution taking shape, it was a symbol of progress. When Marshall Community Financial officially opened its doors, the ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd larger than anyone had expected. Reporters mingled with local business owners, faith leaders, and residents who had once viewed banks with distrust. Many had never met a bank president who looked like them, spoke their language, or genuinely listened to their concerns. Evan addressed the crowd not with a prepared speech, but with heartfelt honesty. "This isn't just about banking," he began. "It's about dignity, about making sure that every person who walks through those doors knows they matter, that their worth isn't measured by the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the assumptions others make." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the gathering. "I experienced firsthand what happens when institutions forget their purpose. Thanks to people like Elliot and others who stood up for what's right, we've turned that painful moment into a promise that this place will never repeat those mistakes." The crowd erupted in applause, not just for the sentiment but for the action behind it. As weeks turned into months, Marshall Community Financial thrived. It offered services tailored to small businesses, first-time homeowners, and individuals previously excluded from mainstream banking. Financial literacy workshops became a regular feature, empowering clients to make informed decisions about their futures. Other banks took notice. Some even began adopting similar policies and community engagement models. What had begun as a response to discrimination had become a catalyst for industry-wide introspection. For Evan, the success of the new bank was gratifying, but the most meaningful moments came quietly, like when an elderly couple, who had once hesitated to even enter a bank branch, stopped by to thank him for creating a place where they finally felt respected, or when a young entrepreneur denied loans elsewhere, secured funding to launch her business, and returned months later to deposit her first profits. This is what real progress looks like, Evan thought one evening as he locked up the branch after a long day. Elliot stood beside him, the two men sharing a quiet moment of reflection. "Do you think Jessica Keller ever imagined this would be the outcome?" Elliot asked. Evan shook his head, a faint smile crossing his face. "People like her rarely consider the consequences beyond their own decisions, but sometimes those consequences lead to something better than anyone could have predicted." As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Evan looked up at the sign above the door. Marshall Community Financial. It wasn't just his name. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of standing firm in the face of prejudice, and to the belief that every setback holds the potential for renewal. And in that belief, a community had found not just a bank, but a new beginning. 6 months had passed since Marshall Community Financial opened its doors. What had begun as a response to a painful act of public humiliation had blossomed into something far greater. Not just a successful business, but a beacon of change. Yet for Evan Marshall, the true measure of success was not in profit margins or favorable media coverage. It was in the quiet, daily affirmations that dignity and fairness had been restored, where once they had been denied. One crisp autumn morning, Evan returned to the Peachtree Plaza area for the first time since the incident that had set everything in motion. Dressed once again in the simple, understated style he had worn that day. Dark slacks, a navy sweater, polished shoes. He walked past the familiar stone facade of the Hamilton Trust branch. Through the large windows, he noticed changes. Staff he recognized were still there, but their demeanor seemed different now, more attentive, more welcoming. Behind the counters, new posters promoting equitable service and community engagement were prominently displayed. A small plaque near the entrance read, "In commitment to fairness, transparency, and respect for all clients." Evan nodded silently. Change had taken root, even in the soil where prejudice once flourished. Crossing the street, he entered the bright, open lobby of Marshall Community Financial. The atmosphere was warm and vibrant, filled with the hum of conversation and the soft clicking of keyboards. At one desk, Elliot was assisting an elderly woman reviewing a small business loan application. Nearby, a young man in work overalls deposited his first paycheck into a savings account, a wide smile lighting his face. Evan's eyes softened. These were not just transactions. They were affirmations that his mission, born out of disrespect, had become a movement of empowerment. "Mr. Marshall." A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see a woman standing with her young son. She looked familiar, and after a moment, he remembered her as one of the clients who had witnessed the scene at Hamilton Trust months before. "I just wanted to thank you," she continued. "You probably don't remember me, but I was there the day they turned you away. My son saw what happened. It was a hard thing for him to understand. But now," she gestured around the room, "now he knows that standing up for yourself and for others can lead to change. He even tells his friends about how you started this bank." The boy, no older than 8, smiled shyly. "Mom says you make sure people are treated right." Evan knelt slightly, meeting the boy's gaze. "Your mom's right. But do you know what else? People like Elliot and everyone here also make sure of it. One person can start change, but it takes many people to keep it going." The boy nodded seriously, as though receiving a great responsibility. As mother and son departed, Evan stood silently for a moment, reflecting on how far things had come, and how far they still had to go. He turned toward the lobby's main wall where a new inscription had been added beneath the bank's logo. It read, "Respect costs nothing, but failing to give it may cost everything." Those words, born out of pain, now served as a daily reminder not only to the staff and clients of Marshall Community Financial, but to Evan himself. They were not simply a reaction to past injustice. They were a guiding principle for the future. And as Evan watched the steady rhythm of banking life continue, people of all backgrounds receiving the fair, dignified service they deserved, he felt a quiet certainty settle within him. Some battles were forced upon you, others you chose, but the fight for respect, for equity, and for the right to simply be treated as worthy, that was a battle always worth winning. And in this place, that battle had been won, not once, but every single day. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and share so others can see the power of standing up for what's right. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where justice prevails and dignity is restored. And remember, no matter where you come from or what you look like, you deserve respect, always.